Hello, my name is Vesa. I'm a somatic therapist and holistic coach, and in this video I'm going to take you through one of my emotional alchemy processes, which will allow you to learn the process of sitting with your emotions and feeling them and processing those challenging emotions and triggers that you may be feeling like are holding you back from living your fullest life. So this process is really powerful because it's about empowering you to build a new relationship with your challenging emotions. So as part of this mini training, you will have access to a worksheet which will guide you through the process, and you'll also have a recorded practice that I'll be taking you through to allow you to work through the process all by yourself. Now, if you've just found this video on YouTube, you can get a link to my worksheet and a link to the practice video just in the comments below. And so the reason why I'm providing you with this training is because there are so many misconceptions out there about emotions, and we're not taught this information at school. Honestly, I believe if we knew how to process our emotions, how to be with them, and if we were taught how to have a better and healthier relationship with our emotions, I believe there'd be so much less suffering in the world today. So let's start by defining what an emotion is. And you've probably heard this quite often. Emotions are energy in motion. Now, emotions are these natural messengers that we have in life that give us information about what's going on in our current reality. One of the really important things that I want to clear up for you is there are actually no good or bad emotions. This is a big misconception because the more challenging emotions that we label as bad, such as anger, grief, sadness, guilt, or shame, can feel very uncomfortable in the body. And when we're experiencing these emotions, like, who wants to experience discomfort, right? So it's our natural human inclination to try and push these emotions away. So we stuff them down, we numb, suppress, avoid, distract. And often this is done through behaviors such as drinking, emotional eating, gambling, compulsive shopping, taking addictive substances. And all of these behaviors, they're all just ways that we tend to escape from feeling these emotions. So the way out of feeling the challenging emotions is actually through. We don't want to avoid feeling the emotions, because when an emotion isn't allowed to complete its cycle, it actually becomes trapped in the body. And that is where we end up with these lifelong wounds, which then create triggers throughout our life. And then they can manifest in your body as a physical experience. So for example, I know in the past, whenever I used to feel anxiety, I used to get a very heavy sensation in my chest. And that's where you can eventually get physical manifestations of the emotion through pain in the body, like tightness in the jaw, heaviness in the chest, or further down the line, perhaps even some physical conditions or ailments. And something really important to keep in mind is we cannot actually get rid of our emotions. They're part of our natural human experience, and our full spectrum of emotions is a very natural part of life. And if we're pushing away the challenging ones whilst only welcoming in the more positive ones, such as joy, happiness, and love, what that does is not feeling the full extent of your emotional experience, including the challenging ones, can actually numb you and prevent you from feeling the full extent of the more positive ones. So it's a very important thing to keep in mind. When we're not allowing ourselves to be fully present with an emotional experience, it can have an impact on the way we feel all of our other emotions in general. So the reason why emotions feel challenging is because we've had a prior undigested life experience that has then created an emotional imprint in the body. For simplicity's purposes, let's call it a wound. Really important to understand the role that our past and our childhood plays in terms of why we feel uncomfortable emotions in our adult life. As children, we don't actually have the capacity to be with difficult and challenging sensations. So what actually happens is we'll repress feeling the discomfort. A very simple example is, as a child at school, your teacher asked a question to the class, you put your hand up, you answer the question, but you answer it incorrectly. And the whole class and maybe the teacher start laughing at you. And in this moment, you might start to feel a whole lot of hurt and shame. But because you don't have the skills or the capacity to process that hurt and shame, what happens is you end up holding on to that emotion, you suppress it, and it creates an emotional charge in the body. And how this might then play out in your future is down the track when you're in a professional environment and your boss calls upon you to answer a question in a group meeting and you freeze up because suddenly your body is triggered and your body remembers that emotional imprint from your childhood, from when you were laughed at in class when you answered something wrong. Or for example, you're in a relationship and your partner puts you on the spot and wants you to answer some questions about the relationship, and you freeze up and you don't know why, and you're overwhelmed with this sensation of fear. That's a very basic example, but it can show you how these emotional wounds from our childhood can actually drive so many of our behaviors throughout our life. And it's a very unconscious process. A lot of the time, we don't even know what the root cause is of a lot of these reactions we have to life and certain situations. The beauty is you can actually heal those emotional wounds. And I'm going to teach you how to do that in my Emotional Alchemy process. So when it comes to effectively processing your emotions, the key phrase you may have heard is you have to feel it to heal it. There's actually been some neuroscience studies done which prove that an emotion only needs 90 seconds to be fully felt for it to reach its cycle of completion. 90 seconds is not a long time to sit with your emotions. I've seen this in clients and in my own experience. You can actually alchemize an emotion in that short period of time, but there's a few caveats here. The only time an emotion will be processed to its full extent is if you don't allow any stories or limiting beliefs or your analytical mind to get in the way. Processing your emotions is a full-bodied experience. It is about feeling and experiencing and not about thinking. So we often get stuck in these patterns and cycles when we assign meaning to an emotion. So in the example that I provided about the child being laughed at school, he assigned meaning to that experience where if I speak up, I will be shamed and I will be ridiculed. And that is where the emotion becomes stuck, is when we assign that cognitive, that analytical meaning, and we create this limiting belief in ourselves. But if we treat that emotion as neutral and allow it to be fully experienced and processed energetically in the body, that is when you can fully transmute and alchemize an emotion. That original experience of that emotion then won't trigger you further into the future. So now I'll take you through my Emotional Alchemy process for being able to process your emotions by yourself. I have a number of different approaches to Emotional Alchemy. This is one of them. So this is called the S.E.A method. So S.E.A as in the ocean, the water, the sea. S.E.A. So S stands for sense, E stands for embrace, and A stands for alchemize. This S.E.A process is to be uniquely done on yourself, whereas I have some other emotional alchemy processes that I work through with clients one-on-one or when I work in a group coaching container. The S.E.A process not only utilizes emotions, but it uses the energy of your body to help you process and alchemize your emotions. This S.E.A process will be outlined in the worksheet that I've provided, and I also take you through it as part of the somatic practice recording. However, it is important to listen to this video because it does provide some important context which will allow you to do it more effectively. So step 1 in this process is called sense. So as part of this step, you will be noticing when you're triggered or when an emotional reaction comes up. And depending on the context, so if you're alone at home, this would be a great opportunity to pause. But if you're at work, if you know your boss has spoken to you in a certain way that triggers you, maybe you might want to hold off on undertaking this process until you actually get home and you can be in a safe and tranquil environment. Let's just say you're at home, you're watching a movie, and a wave of sadness comes over you because you're watching a scene that reminds you of some kind of experience from your past. So when you become triggered, when you notice that sadness, what you'll do is you'll pause. And before you go to the fridge and get your bucket of ice cream to try and numb yourself and try to make yourself feel better by eating some sugar, or before you reach for a glass of wine, you will pause in that moment and you'll tune into what's going on in your body. So you're going to take a few deep breaths and you're going to feel into any sensations that are coming up for you in your body. So just notice, without getting too over analytical, notice what's going on in your body. Do you have a tightness in your chest perhaps? Is there a clenching in your gut? Do you feel a tightness in your jaw? Is there a fluttering in your stomach? So you'll pause and you'll notice and you'll tune into your body. The language of the emotions is expressed through the body. So this is very, very important. And the real key thing is to just explore what's going on in your body with a sense of curiosity, always being mindful to not approach it from a place of judgment or harsh criticism. That's the language of the mind. However, we're now tuning into the language of the emotions and the body. So it's a very different experience. So the next step from here is to embrace. As you're feeling into your body, you want to notice if any emotions come up. And if a sense of sadness comes up, we don't want to judge it. We don't want to apply meaning to it. We just want to feel it in our body. So if we're feeling it in the chest, we want to sit with the sadness and we want to feel into how that feels in our body. This step here is about acknowledging the emotion. It's about building a different relationship with the emotion. Where in the past, you might have pushed the emotion away because you didn't know what to do with it. It just felt too uncomfortable. Here you're creating a different relationship with the experience. So you're allowing yourself to be with it and to breathe into that emotion without judgment and without a story attached to it. During this step, there may be times where you'll feel a memory come up, a memory that's associated with this emotion. You might have an insight into how old you were or how old this emotion is. Certain things can pop in through your subconscious. It's a very interesting experience when it does happen because it's like, something's just popped up and I don't know where it came from, but just trust whatever comes up for you. Often when a memory does come up, it can be the origin of that particular emotion. It can be a very, very insightful experience. However, again, we're not going to judge the memory. We'll just come back to that emotion and just be present with it in our body. So at this point, your emotion may be wanting to be expressed in a certain way. So you can ask yourself, how does this emotion want to be expressed? Or you can just feel into the energy of the emotion and see how it wants to be expressed through the body. So you might naturally start to cry if the emotion is sadness. You might yawn. That can be a very natural expression of an emotional charge. If the emotion is anger, for example, anger often wants to be moved through the body and it wants to be expressed by your voice. So if anger does come up and you feel an urge to scream, you can definitely do that. You can grab a pillow and like scream into a pillow. That's often a very safe way to do it without alerting anyone around you, without them worrying that you're in trouble. Or if you do feel the urge to like punch something, punching a pillow is definitely a really healthy expression of anger. What happens here is you're allowing the energy to move through your body. So remember, emotions are energy in motion. So when you allow the energy to move, that is when you're allowing that emotion to fully complete its cycle. So in this step, sometimes you'll find that you might not have a physical response. You might just have a very energetic response, and that is okay too. That can also signify you processing and being with your emotions. I have this quite often where I can be sitting with an emotion and it's all happening internally, it's all happening energetically in my body. I'll notice the sensations are moving through my body rather than me needing to express through movement. And then once the emotion has been allowed to be fully expressed and to complete its cycle, what happens is the third step in the S.E.A process, which is alchemize. Once an emotional charge dissipates, what you'll notice is you'll have some wisdom come through. So if this emotion was associated with a memory that came up, you might then view that memory from a very different perspective without an emotional charge associated with it. And so when you can see that memory from a place of neutrality, it completely changes how you felt about that particular situation. It's at this step where you can also get some other incredibly profound insight. You can feel a sense of oneness or joy or bliss, and it can be a very profound spiritual experience. By experiencing that emotion fully without suppressing it or without trying to change it, you allow it to integrate, allowing some embodied insights to come through. You can feel a sense of inner calm and a sense of completion. If the S.E.A process is done with full presence and done in a fully embodied way, you can actually alchemize your emotions within 90 seconds. However, it's quite common for people to not have that full emotional alchemy process when they do this for the first time, or even when they do it a number of times, because we're so conditioned to avoid our emotions, to avoid feeling our current experience. It's so normal for us to not know how to be fully present with what's going on in our experience. We can let our mind get in the way, and when that happens, it can be a lot harder to allow your emotions to process. But in that case, don't be hard on yourself. It can take time to become comfortable with this process. The more you practice it, the more effective it can be for you. And of course, if you're struggling to work through the process, or if you need some extra assistance, I work through this one-on-one with my clients, and it can be a lot more effective when you have someone holding space for you and guiding you through the process. So if you feel called to dive in a lot deeper into this work and to working one-on-one with me, feel free to reach out, of course. Now, after listening to this, you'll be ready to dive into the emotional alchemy practice in the second video. So make sure you've got your worksheet ready, because that'll help you note down and journal the outcomes of the process, which will also help you with the integration of this. And honestly, I'm just really excited that you're taking the courage to dive in deeper towards feeling your emotions and processing them on your own. And I'm just really, really grateful that I've been able to provide you with this beautiful tool for you to empower yourselves to take charge of your life without allowing your subconscious triggers to drive your life. So thank you, and of course reach out in the comments if you've got any questions.